The trap you enter as a child. Nietzsche's dark truth about school. When you first walk into a classroom as a child, everything seems innocent. Bright colors, friendly voices, alphabet posters on the wall, and a teacher smiling like they already know who you're supposed to become. But what if I told you that this moment, this seemingly harmless entry into the world of education, is actually the beginning of a psychological trap? What if this is the moment where the self begins to fracture? Where your potential is not nurtured, but strategically redirected? Friedrich Nietzsche saw it. Long before standardized tests and behavior charts, he recognized something chilling, that society doesn't educate us to think, it educates us to obey. And when you see it, really see it, you'll never look at school the same way again. Nietzsche wasn't against learning. He was obsessed with truth, knowledge, and the raw pursuit of meaning. But he saw that institutions, especially schools, often do the opposite of what they claim. They don't awaken the individual. They suppress it. They don't teach you to think for yourself. They teach you the appearance of thinking while rewarding conformity. And the most dangerous part, you enter this system as a child before you've developed the tools to question it, before you even know what you really means. And so, you adapt. You learn how to sit still, raise your hand, memorize the right facts, and most of all, seek approval. You learn that being good means being predictable, and that success means fitting in. That the best version of you is the one that asks the fewest questions.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
But here's the philosophical dilemma. What if your real self, the one that's spontaneous, creative, rebellious, curious, is not compatible with the system? What if the very traits that make you unique are the ones that school quietly disciplines out of you? Nietzsche would argue that this is not a flaw in the system. It's the design. Because a society built on order and obedience has no interest in producing free spirits. It wants workers, not visionaries, followers, not creators. So it creates institutions that train you to internalize someone else's idea of who you should be. And this training begins so early that most of us don't even realize it's happening. We just think we're learning. But what we're really learning is how to be liked, how to be safe, how to be invisible in all the right ways. Nietzsche called this the herd instinct, the deep, unconscious drive to belong, even at the cost of your individuality. And school is the first place most of us learn how to trade authenticity for acceptance. Have you ever wondered why you were more creative as a child? Why you asked more questions? Why you weren't afraid to be silly, or wrong, or different? And why, somewhere along the way, that part of you started to fade? That's the trap. School doesn't kill the soul all at once. It does it in increments, one good grade at a time, one gold star at a time, one moment of shame when you colored outside the lines. It teaches you not to trust your instincts. It teaches you that the right answer is the one the teacher already knows, that your worth is tied to your performance. And slowly you begin to live from the outside in always waiting for someone else to tell you who you are. Nietzsche believed that true education should be dangerous, not safe, not standardized. It should confront you with your ignorance. It should challenge your beliefs. It should force you to wrestle with truth, not repeat it. But that kind of education doesn't produce obedient citizens. It produces awakened humans. And that's precisely why it's so rare. Because when people start thinking for themselves, they become harder to control. They stop fitting into neat little boxes. They start asking inconvenient questions like, why do we all learn the same things, in the same way, at the same pace? Why is creativity treated like a side subject instead of the foundation of learning? Why do we measure intelligence by how well someone takes a test? And maybe the most haunting question of all, what would you have become if school hadn't taught you to doubt yourself first? Nietzsche saw how early systems of control shaped the psyche. And he didn't just blame schools. He blamed the deeper instinct in human beings to fear chaos, to fear individuality, to fear the unknown. So we build systems that protect us from that fear. We build schools that reward sameness, and we tell ourselves it's for the child's benefit. But what if it's actually for ours? What if we're more comfortable raising obedient children than free ones because free children remind us of the freedom we gave up long ago? If you've ever felt like you were playing a role in school, like you were performing instead of learning, that's not your imagination. That's the system working exactly as intended. But it doesn't want you fully alive. It wants you functional. It wants you useful. And most of all, it wants you predictable. But here's where things get interesting. Nietzsche didn't believe we had to stay in the trap. He believed in the Übermensch, the one who breaks free, who creates their own values, who reclaims their inner chaos and turns it into power. So let me ask you, are you still living according to ideas someone else gave you in a classroom? Are you still trying to be a good student even long after school ended? Because the real exam was never on paper. It was always in your soul. And the grade you truly need to worry about is how much of your real self survived the system. The curriculum of control, why they teach you what they teach you, and what they don't want you to think about, let's be brutally honest. When you think back on the years you spent in school, how much of what you were taught actually shaped your inner world, your identity, your purpose? How much of it awakened your soul instead of just occupying your time? If you're like most people, the answer is hauntingly clear: not much. And that's not an accident. That's architecture. Because the curriculum you're given is not neutral. It's a carefully constructed map, and every line on that map points in one direction: compliance. Nietzsche understood that education, when disconnected from the pursuit of truth, becomes an instrument of power. So we must ask, why are we taught what we're taught? Why is history presented as a clean narrative of progress instead of a chaotic struggle between power and resistance? Why are we tested on memorization rather than meaning? Why are the arts optional but obedience mandatory? The answer is simple but terrifying, because the system is not designed to liberate your mind. It's designed to manage it. From the moment you enter school, the message is clear: there are right answers and wrong answers, and the right answers are already decided. You are not being trained to discover truth, but you are being trained to accept it, even when it contradicts your intuition, even when it deadens your curiosity, even when it makes you feel small. This is the curriculum of control, where knowledge is not something you create, but something you consume. But you're told what matters, what doesn't, what to study, what to ignore. And over time you stop asking why. Why don't they teach us how to think about thinking? Why don't they teach us how to deal with fear, with grief, with conflict, with failure? Why don't they show us how to question authority, how to navigate contradictions, how to find beauty in the unknown? Because those questions are dangerous. They create thinkers, and thinkers create tension. They disrupt the flow. They refuse to be satisfied with answers that serve the system but not the soul. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But school rarely gives you a why. It gives you a how to solve for X, how to write a 5-paragraph essay, how to regurgitate a theory, how to play the game. But it never teaches you why the game exists, who created it, or whether you should be playing it at all. That's not education, that's domestication. And the curriculum is selective for a reason. You're taught the history of empires, not the psychology of oppression. You're taught economic models, not emotional resilience. You're taught how to analyze literature, but not how to write your own story. You're taught to compete, not to collaborate, to obey, not to imagine. This is not about conspiracy, it's about culture. A culture that fears the awakened mind. Because an awakened mind doesn't fit in. It doesn't follow the script. It writes its own. And the most disturbing part? We internalize this curriculum so deeply that we begin to censor ourselves. We stop asking the questions that once came naturally to us as children. We stop coloring outside the lines not because someone told us not to, but because we forgot how. We stop dreaming with the wildness we once had. We trade passion for productivity, wonder for work ethic. We become efficient, but not enlightened. So what does freedom look like in a world where the curriculum is designed to control you? It starts with remembering that you were never meant to just learn what others have discovered. You were meant to discover what others have never dared to learn. You were meant to explore questions that have no answers, to feel things textbooks can't explain, to build a life that doesn't fit into a syllabus. Ask yourself right now, what are the questions you were never allowed to ask? What are the truths you were taught to fear? And whose idea of success are you still trying to live up to? Because until you answer those questions, you're not free. You're just well trained. Nietzsche believed that real education is dangerous because it leads to transformation, but not the kind that earns a certificate, but the kind that sets fire to everything false in you. The kind that makes you unrecognizable to the systems that once defined you. And in that transformation, you don't just escape the curriculum of control. You rewrite it. The death of the wild spirit, how school kills the inner rebel and replaces it with the good citizen. There's something wild in every child. You've seen it. That spark. That untamed energy that wants to run, shout, build things that collapse, ask questions that adults can't answer, laugh at the wrong time, cry for no reason, and break rules just to feel what's on the other side. That wildness isn't a flaw, it's the beginning of authenticity. It's the raw, unfiltered human spirit reaching out toward life. But in the structure of modern education, that spirit is not nurtured, it's not guided, it's subdued, it's corrected, it's slowly replaced. Nietzsche believed that every powerful spirit begins as a rebel, not a rebel for rebellion's sake, but someone who refuses to be told what life is before they've explored it for themselves. But school has no room for this kind of soul. It needs predictability. So from a young age, we are taught that questioning too much is disruptive, that daydreaming is inattentive, and that expressing frustration is inappropriate. Slowly, the message becomes clear. The wild parts of you are wrong. And if you want to be accepted, you must become something else. Something quieter, more polite, more manageable. This is how the inner rebel dies, not in a single moment, but in a series of subtle compromises. You stop drawing dragons and start drawing what the teacher asks for. You stop asking why and start giving the right answer. You stop trusting your instincts because they don't match the rubric. And eventually you stop even noticing that the rebel is missing. Because now you've become something else entirely, a good student, a responsible young adult, a model citizen. But Nietzsche would say that this model citizen is often a ghost of who you really are. The tragedy is that the very traits society later admires, creativity, leadership, innovation, courage, are the same ones it punishes in childhood. We celebrate rebels when they succeed, but we silence them when they're young. We quote Steve Jobs, "Think different," but punish the child who thinks differently in math class. We praise revolutionaries in history, but discipline the student who challenges the textbook. And so we grow up with this contradiction. We are told to be original, but only after we've been thoroughly conditioned not to be. Nietzsche saw this as a kind of spiritual death, a quiet assassination of the self. Because the wild spirit is not just about rebellion, but it's about becoming. It's the part of you that refuses to be shaped by anything but your own experience. It's the part that says, "I will not live your version of life, I will create my own." And when that part is silenced, we lose more than imagination. We lose truth. Ask yourself, when did you first start to care more about being accepted than being real? When did you begin editing yourself to fit in, to be liked, to be safe? That is the moment the wild spirit was traded for the obedient self. And it happens to almost everyone. Not because we're weak, but because the pressure is overwhelming. The system doesn't just demand conformity, it rewards it. You get good grades for following instructions, not for following your intuition. You get praise for staying in line, not for stepping off the path. And over time, you forget there even was a path of your own. But here's the philosophical twist. The wild spirit never truly dies. It goes underground. It waits. Sometimes in dreams. Sometimes in anger. Sometimes in those late-night moments of unease when you wonder if this life you're living is really yours. Nietzsche believed that the self must be reclaimed, that you have to go back into the ruins of who you were told to be, and find the living spark that still remains. The rebel, the creator, the soul that belongs to no system. This isn't easy, because escaping the trap means unlearning everything that made you successful in the eyes of the system. It means disappointing people. It means questioning rules you once followed without hesitation. It means rediscovering a voice that's been buried under years of politeness and pressure. But what waits on the other side is not chaos. It's authenticity. It's freedom. So the question becomes, are you willing to disappoint the world in order to be true to yourself? Are you willing to resurrect the rebel in you, even if it means tearing apart the life built on obedience? Because that's where your real life begins, not with a diploma, not with a job title, not with approval, but with the return of the part of you that never asked for permission to exist. Nietzsche didn't want us to become rebels for rebellion's sake. He wanted us to become whole. And wholeness can only happen when we stop trying to be what the system approves of and start becoming what our soul demands. The forgotten self, how to reclaim your mind, rewire your soul, and escape the system for good if everything you were taught was designed to make you forget who you are. Then the most powerful act of rebellion is to remember. Not just intellectually, but viscerally, to remember what it feels like to be you before you were shaped. That's the forgotten self. The parts of you that were never meant to be efficient or polite. The parts that were wild, intuitive, stubborn, emotional, spontaneous, and deeply, unapologetically alive. Escaping the system doesn't mean vanishing from society. It means waking up inside of it and refusing to let it define you anymore. Nietzsche believed that we are not born as finished selves, but as raw material potential. And the tragedy of modern life is that most people are shaped into something they never chose. They become a reflection of expectations instead of a revelation of truth. But if that's true, then it's also true that we can reshape ourselves. We can deconstruct the false identity and build something real. But this demands more than motivation. It demands a kind of inner war. A confrontation with everything you've ever been told, and an honest look at what parts of you were never truly yours. It starts with awareness. You cannot escape a prison you don't know you're in. So begin by asking questions you were never encouraged to ask. Why do I believe what I believe? Why do I want what I want? Who benefits from me staying on this path? These aren't easy questions. They shake the foundation. But without them, you stay trapped in a life that feels fine on the surface, but empty underneath. You become successful in a system that never had your liberation in mind. Next, you have to unlearn, and this is painful. Because unlearning means letting go of identities that once protected you. It means questioning the praise you once craved. It means realizing that being a top student or model employee might have cost you your spontaneity, your creativity, your truth. But here's the paradox: you cannot become who you really are until you're willing to dissolve who you were trained to be. Nietzsche wrote of the Übermensch not as a superhero, but as a self-created being, someone who doesn't inherit meaning, but creates it, someone who doesn't follow morality handed down from authority, but generates values from the fire of their own experience. That's the goal. Not to rebel for rebellion's sake, but to become, and to live from the inside out. To build a life so infused with your own essence that no system, no school, no institution can ever take it from you again. So how do you rewire a soul? You start by creating silence. Real silence, where the voices of teachers, parents, mentors, algorithms, and expectations all fall away, and only your voice remains. In that silence, you begin to feel again. You begin to remember what excites you, what angers you, what breaks your heart open. You begin to trust your inner compass more than anyone else's map. But then you act. Not perfectly, not all at once. But you take steps that align with the truth you've uncovered. You create, you speak, you change paths, you set boundaries, you disappoint people, you risk being misunderstood. And in doing so, you begin to rewrite the story. Not the one you were handed, but the one you were born to write. Ask yourself, what would your life look like if you had never been taught to doubt yourself? What dreams would you chase if you no longer needed permission? Who would you become if you finally believed you were allowed to be fully alive? This is the forgotten self calling you. The one that never fit in. The one that asked too many questions. The one that used to look out the window in school and wonder if there was more. There was. There is. And you can still return to it. Nietzsche didn't offer comfort, he offered clarity. He didn't promise happiness, he demanded truth. And the truth is, the trap you entered as a child can be escaped. But only if you're willing to burn the version of yourself that was built to survive in a system that never saw your soul. You were not born to obey. You were born to become. So become. And never forget, The real education begins the moment you start remembering who you were before the world told you what to be.